Hey guys, today is day 11 of Glory Week. We're going to be reading chapters 19 and 20. So, when we left off in our reading last time on chapter 18, let's see. Jesslyn and Glory were talking about how Glory promised not to tell her dad Jesslyn and Robbie's secret about Robbie getting in trouble and going to jail in North Carolina. However, she did tell Frankie, and Frankie was looking really sad. She wanted to try and make him feel better about Robbie and things like that, and so she told him their secret. When she promised Jesslyn she wouldn't tell anybody. And they were splashing in the rain and having so much fun, but Glory was really worried about what she had done, and she felt really guilty about it. So we are going to see what happens next now that Frankie knows Robbie's secret, and now that Jesslyn and Glory showed up to church soaking wet from the rain, and their daddy is not happy about it. So we are on chapter 19, Dinner Table Disaster. Make sure that anything I write on my notebook that you are going to write also, because there will be questions on it on the Google form after the video. Since the Lord's Day was Emma's day off, most Sundays right after the service, we'd eat with the church family. Today, I hoped we'd get an invitation so Daddy would forget about me and Jesslyn sloshing in the mud. When the last hymn ended and we hung our choir robes in the closet, Mrs. Simpson started towards us. I wanted to run as fast as I could from her and that rotten egg smile. I'd rather listen to Daddy fussing at me all afternoon than sit one single minute with Mrs. Simpson. Beautiful service this morning, Brother Joe. I thought our choir sang awfully pretty. Didn't you, girls? She adjusted the hat and veil that mostly covered up her green-tinted hair. She smiled at her daddy. Would you like to come for noon dinner? Unless somebody else has spoken for you. The next thing I knew, Lordy help us, Jesslyn and me were in Mrs. Simpson's dining room, sitting in straight-back chairs, pushing pot roast around fancy china plates. This was not the kind of house where anybody leaves the newspaper scattered on the floor, or an iced tea glass sweating on the sideboard. Mrs. Simpson looked down from the head of her big table, like not just the queen of the community pool directing her swimming esters, but the queen of hanging moss running our town. Brother Joe, she said, did Gloriana tell you she paid a visit down to the paper? Just a sliver of sunlight came through Mrs. Simpson's heavy curtains, and the giant chandelier over the table was turned down low, as if keeping it dark inside would make it cooler. But I was sweating. Daddy's eyebrow went up. He put his heavy silver fork down a little too hard on the white tablecloth, and he looked right at me. Is that right? He asked. She brought by her very own letter to the newspaper editor, didn't you, dearie? Mrs. Simpson took a bite of her mashed potatoes and then started cutting her roast beef. She was smiling at me as if writing to the Hanging Moss Tribune might just be fine and dandy. I held on to my water goblet so tight, I worried it would break. Daddy wrinkled up his forehead. He does that sometimes when he's thinking hard about what to say. But Jesslyn spoke up first. You wrote a letter to the newspaper, Glory? She asked. You didn't tell me that. I took a sip of iced tea, hoping that would settle my belly flops down. Well, I wrote to say I didn't think it was right to close our pool. Emma was the only one who helped me, and mostly what she did was make sure that some of the words were spelled right, when I asked her to. I put my hand up to my mouth. Oh no, I hoped I hadn't gotten Emma in trouble. I looked at Daddy. Do you think maybe it worked? Jesslyn and I saw a sign there today saying the pool's opening to everybody. He turned to Mrs. Simpson. I've tried to teach my girls to speak up when they see a wrong being done. But I didn't read Glory's letter in the paper this week, he said. That's good news about the pool. Mrs. Simpson finished chewing with her mouth completely closed, like Emma always tells us is polite, touched her napkin to the corner of her lip, and cleared her throat. Well, perhaps the editor didn't find Glory's letter appropriate for our readers, she said. And I don't know what you mean about the pool opening. Of course, my Esters and I hate to see it closed. She patted her greenish hair and smiled. But repairs are needed. That's that. My group will be swimming at a friend's pool. Not quite as large as our community pool, but it will have to do. Mrs. Simpson looked down the table at Jesslyn and me. I'm sure you girls can find another place to swim, can't they, Brother Joe? Our daddy taught us to respect our elders, and I wasn't supposed to talk back to members of the First Fellowship in particular. But I just couldn't help myself. No, we can't find another place to swim. We want our pool to stay open. Did you even take my letter out of that drawer where you hid it? Did you show it to the editor? I asked. I looked from Mrs. Simpson to Daddy and then to Jesslyn. Somebody must have seen it. Maybe the editor gave it to the mayor. Why else do you think they put that new sign at the pool? Jesslyn sat up straight at the table. If it's really opening like the sign says, I bet it was Glory's letter. Jesslyn was actually sticking up for me. What exactly was in that letter? Why, I might have a copy right here. Mrs. Simpson pushed away from the table, and she walked over to the sideboard and opened up a drawer. Glory, would you like to share it since the only person who seems to have seen it is your maid? She narrowed her eyes and looked from me to Daddy. She handed me the letter like it was written with a poison pen. I took a sip of iced tea and almost choked swallowing it. I felt like I was smothering to death in Mrs. Simpson's dining room. I glanced down at the white paper covered with my best script writing. Oh no, I shouldn't have said all that. What if my daddy gets in big trouble? By now, my stomach was flopping so hard I could hardly hold up the letter. But I unfolded it and I began to read. June 26th, 1964. Dear Editor, I love our community pool. My birthday party has been there every single summer since forever. But my forever is over now. My forever has been shut down with no plans of opening. Some stupid town council committee locked the gates up tight. They claim they're making the pool better, fixing cracks and broken fences. I don't believe that for a minute. They can lie all the livelong day, but they can't lock up that hot as fire rage burning inside me. They can hammer their pool closed signs, but they better not expect me to stay closed. Does anybody think, just 'cause I'm not a grown-up, that I can't see everything clear as day? The people in this town dumb enough to agree to shut down a pool to keep Negroes out, and lying about it by saying it's the pool that needs fixing. They're the fools who can't see. I hadn't lifted my eyes from that paper once. I was afraid to look at my daddy's disappointed face. My hands were shaking, but I willed myself to keep reading. What's really broken and needs fixing most of all are the backwards people running this town and the others that won't do a thing about it. You know what? Maybe I'm the fool and blind, or should I say I was a fool who used to be blind. I was dumb enough to fall for that ugly lies. I was blind to hatred and that stings more than a bucket full of the pool's strongest chlorine. And guess what? I, Gloriana June Hemphill, can swim underwater with my eyes open. I can look through the cloudiest, strongest chlorine. And I don't blink, even underwater. I see what's going on in Hanging Moss. You ignorant people who act like you own our town aren't fooling me one bit. I took a deep breath to slow down my heart and let the words sit for a while at the silent table. Nobody talked. Even Mrs. Simpson's clock seemed to stop its ticking. I finished reading. Every summer, there's bothersome mosquito bites that set me scratching all night. Sweat that makes my shirt stick to my skin. Heat that makes me nauseous. But the worst thing is when I step in a pile of what some mangy dog left behind, and the mess gets all over my shoes, and it stinks to high heaven. That's what closing the pool feels like to me. Hateful prejudice and dog dew are a lot alike. They both make me sick. Gloriana June Hemphill, age 11. My throat was burning dry when I was done reading. My knuckles were white as the paper I was clutching. I couldn't hardly believe I'd written that. My daddy would skin me alive. But I meant every word. Jesslyn's mouth was open wider than Mrs. Simpson's gleaming round dinner plates. Daddy had his head down, shaking it slowly back and forth. Mrs. Simpson looked like she'd stepped in dog dew herself. It felt like all the air had been sucked right out of that hot dining room, and I choked back angry tears. But Daddy reached over and he grabbed my hand, and he squeezed it hard. Even though I was the one crying, something in Daddy looked so sad. I was watching your mother coming through you, he said quietly. She was all like that, opinionated, strong in her convictions. Too outspoken to be a good preacher's wife. He laughed just a little. You and Jesslyn remind me more and more of her every day. Your mother would have been right pleased to hear you just now. I'm proud of you, Glory. I wiped the tears off my face, but I didn't think I could answer yet. I took a swallowful of air and I told myself to breathe. And then Jesslyn smiled down at the table at me, and Daddy beamed at both of us. And I felt light enough to float off my chair and out of that hot, stuffy room. So we're going to stop for a second. A lot has happened in only a few pages. So Gloriana and Jesslyn and their daddy, Brother Joe, are sitting down with Mrs. Hemphill or Mrs. Simpson for their Sunday dinner for lunch. And she has this letter that Gloriana wrote hidden away so that she could show Glory's dad at dinner. And Glory's thinking, oh man, I shouldn't have written that. My daddy's going to be so mad. I'm going to get in trouble and I'll get him in trouble. But he wasn't mad. He felt so proud of her. And he said, I saw your mother coming through you, which means that she was acting and looking like so much like her mom, who he loved, that because she seemed so grown up and she was so opinionated and so strong. And those are really great qualities that we're starting to see in Glory. So there's a lot of important events that we're going to write down, and I want you to write this with me because there's going to be some questions on it. So we're going to write that Mrs. Simpson invites Glory, Jesslyn, and their dad to dinner. Our next event is that Glory reads her letter to the editor. To her family and her dad says how proud he is of her. So Mrs. Simpson invites Glory, Jesslyn, and their dad to dinner. Remember, their dad's name is Brother Joe. So they call him Brother Joe because he's a preacher. And just like sometimes, especially like in the Catholic Church, you might call the priest Father because that's just kind of their title. In their church in Mississippi, they call him Brother Joe. So they think of him as a brother. And that's just kind of his title as their preacher. So Glory reads the letter to the editor, to her family, and her dad says how proud he is of her. So this makes Glory feel so much better. She feels like she's not going to get in trouble anymore. She didn't get anybody in trouble. And she says she feels light as air, that she could just float on out of that room. And I mean, she's feeling really good about it, really good about herself. So we're going to keep reading right here at till Mrs. Simpson's hateful voice brought me right back to the dining room table when she announced, whatever happened to Gloriana's original letter after I shared it with the editor is not my business. Maybe you should make it your business, Mrs. Simpson, Daddy said. You're on the town council. You could have spoken up, about the opening the pool to everyone. Many of our citizens prefer to see it closed, rather than what might happen if we allow people with germs, some people who don't bathe regularly, to swim with us. She stuck her nose up in the air like she was smelling something bad. I speak for the town, and I don't know a thing about the community pool opening for the remainder of this summer, or ever again, for that matter. You don't speak for all the town. Daddy's voice got louder. He folded his napkin and started to push his chair back. You don't speak for me. Jesslyn and I looked across the table at each other. That was our daddy and his choir director. Our daddy, who while we were eating our Sunday dinners with his church people, didn't talk about more than the spring rains coming or the new driveway going in at the bank. And now here he was, standing up to Mrs. Simpson over the pool closing. Miss Bloom was right. Maybe one letter, My letter could make a difference. That's a huge important event. Glory's daddy's saying, you don't speak for the whole town. You definitely don't speak for me. And he gets up. He's raising his voice at his choir director, who they've always been really close. They've worked really closely together. And Glory's thinking, wow, my letter maybe did make a difference because it's starting these people, these adults, to have this conversation that they wouldn't have had before. So next, Brother Joe sticks up for Glory against Mrs. Simpson. He tells her that she doesn't speak for him, which is another way of saying that Brother Joe agrees with Glory that closing the pool is not fair, that everybody should be allowed to swim there. Everybody should be included. Mrs. Simpson picked up her fork and jabbed at her roast beef. And then she clanked the fork down so loud I jumped. The pool needs repairs. There's no two ways about that. It will stay closed. No, ma'am. I stuck that ma'am in to be polite, just like Emma taught me. We saw the sign, didn't we, Jesslyn? For a quick moment, a worried look crossed my sister's face. We saw a sign, she said, frowning. It seemed real. A sign saying the pool's opening by July 4th, my birthday. Frankie showed us, I said, and his daddy's on some committees, too. Jesslyn said, somebody important must have read what you wrote, Glory. I bet it'll be in the paper next week. She looked right at Mrs. Simpson. Daddy's taught me a lot. He says the newspaper's one good way to learn what's happening in the world. But Mrs. Simpson had crossed her knife and fork on her plate, decorated with gold leaves and pink roses. She folded her napkin by her iced tea glass. The pool is closed, she said again. She rang a little bell for the maid to come and take our plates, even though I smelled something sweet as chocolate cake coming from inside the kitchen. It didn't seem like dessert was on the menu today. I don't believe you, I said, just waiting for my daddy to hush me up. But he didn't. Across the table, Jesslyn looked real happy to be my big sister. My letter. That's why we'll be swimming at the community pool on the 4th of July, I said. You're right, Jesslyn. Somebody important read my letter. So, Mrs. Simpson is saying that the pool's not closed, even though Glory and Jesslyn saw that sign. So that's something really important to add to our list because we don't know who's exactly true. So Mrs. Simpson says the pool is closed. Even though Glory, Harrison, we'll talk about it in a minute. Hey. Okay.
And when I please can I have your milk? He said no.
Okay. Well, buddy,
it's not fair.
I'm sorry. It was saying it would open soon. Make sure you write this down with me. Harrison, we'll talk about it in a minute. You have a video chat with Miss Carrillo and your class soon at 5 o'clock. That's in half an hour. And she wants you guys to bring a favorite toy and a baby picture. So why don't you go find your favorite toy that you want to bring for your video call with your friends.
Last time I said I would bring my Pikachu.
Okay, so go get Pikachu.
Or another.
Or whichever one you want. And then I bet Daddy can help you find a baby picture on our walls downstairs.
Oh, I found one. It was with you and me when I was like 3 years old.
Okay.
It was downstairs.
Okay, great. Sorry. So our next important event is that Mrs. Simpson says the pool's closed, even though Gloria and Jessalyn saw a sign saying that it would open soon. So Mrs. Simpson's on the town council, the one that makes those decisions. And she says, I don't know what sign you saw, but it's staying closed. And Gloria and Jessalyn said, no, we saw the sign. It was right there. It was on the gates. So we don't know if the pool's going to open or open yet or not. Sorry, my words getting so mixed up today. So we'll see. We're going to read chapter 20 real quick for this video for day 11. And then we will talk about your questions that will be on your Google form. Chapter 20, If I Live to be 100. Laura came to my house the next morning, saying Miss Bloom needed us to help at the library. I grabbed her hand and headed out the front door. The pool's opening up. Maybe today. Let's go and see the new sign. We headed for the library by way of the community pool. I was talking nonstop about my pool party in 5 more days and how we'd have water balloon races and eat orange snow cones and Emma's special cake, and how much I'd hoped she'd come. But when I saw Jessalyn and Robbie at the pool, I stopped dead still. Jessalyn squinted across the sidewalk at me. My heart sped up when I thought about Robbie's secret that I'd blabbed to Frankie. But Frankie was nowhere in sight. Maybe I was safer now. There's pictures on the wall. Look, by the coats. By the coats, Harrison. Mm-hmm.
There's one of you and me.
Is that the one you want?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get it down when I'm done with my video. Harrison, I'll get it down when I'm done with my video. Now, go find your toy. But Frankie was nowhere in sight. Maybe I was safe for now. Jessalyn stood in front of the pool sign with one hand on her hip and her nose wrinkled up. A few kids in bathing suits, dry as bone, held rolled up towels and elbowed each other. Inside the fence, nobody was splashing, belly flopping, or playing loud radios. What's happening? Asked Jessalyn. Is the pool open? Or do we have to wait till July 4th to swim? We have to wait longer than that. She pointed to the sign that said pool closed until further notice. My stomach tied itself in a knot bigger than those dry towels. Further notice? What does that mean? That's a mistake for sure. We were here yesterday. If it's not open yet, it will be soon. Jessalyn said, just like that busybody Miss Simpson told us. It was a lie that the pool would open. Nobody's admitting to putting up that sign yesterday about the pool opening. Maybe it was just a trick. Robbie leans against the fence, staring inside. Your friend Frankie has a mean streak in him. He's the one who pulled a prank. Frankie? I looked up at the new sign. He did it? As a joke. I heard talk just now. Robbie shrugged his shoulders. Some people said his brother JT dared him. I took a deep breath, smelling the chlorine and the coconut suntan lotion, trying to remember hot dogs frying on the snack bar grill and the lifeguard's whistles. I stood between Jessalyn and Laura with the warm sunshine beating down on my neck. Harrison, go. You remember last July 4th? I asked Jessalyn. The watermelon race? Me and you and Frankie and our cousins at my birthday party? And that cake you and Emma made me, shaped like a cat, remember? They weren't really questions I was asking Jessalyn. I just needed us to remember. I'm sorry, Glory, Laura said. I don't think the pool committee's worried about your birthday party, was all Jessalyn said. Here I was, sure that one little part of this town had changed. That maybe people like Frankie's daddy finally got together to decide opening the pool up for everybody, just in time for 4th of July celebration, was the kind of thing you should do on your country's birthday. But I was wrong. My thinking was all mixed up. A lot of things are different this summer, Glory, Jessalyn said. The corners of her mouth turned down like maybe she wished it was last summer, including your friend. How could Frankie think tricking us into believing the pool opening was funny? I asked. Jessalyn just shook her head and walked off with Robbie. When I peered through those hard metal fence links at the bluest, cleanest water, I was so mad I wanted to spit. I vowed never to speak to that hateful Frankfurter Smith if I lived to be 100. So, couple important events happened. So, Glory takes Laura to see the pool sign. to find a new sign. Harrison, no. No. I said wait. Now, go in your room or go downstairs. Now. To find a new sign saying the pool was closed until further or notice. Another thing is that Frankie put up the fake sign. So we know that Frankie was the one who played that prank to put up the fake sign about the pool opening. So when he said, Glory, let's go to the pool. I heard it's opening. And they go to the pool and they see the sign saying pool opening soon, everyone welcome. And they start dancing and they're so excited. And it was all a trick. And Frankie had tricked Glory. And they've been best friends since forever. And she is so mad at him. She said she's so mad she could spit. She's so angry that her best friend could do something like that because she thought they were really close and she thought he wanted the pool to open. So if you need a second to write down these events, go ahead and pause it. I'm going to lift this up so you can see all of them. Oops, if I can get it that much. Okay. So if you need a minute to write down these events, if you haven't gotten to them yet, press the pause button, write all these down because you're going to need them for your questions, and then press play when you're done because there's one more important event that we need to add to this list before we end day 11 so that you're ready to start day 12. So go ahead and pause the video if you need to write. The last important event we're going to add is that Glory vows, which means she promises to never talk to Frankie again. And again, this is a big thing for her because they've been best friends forever, for practically their whole lives. And she is vowing, she's promising that she's never going to talk to him again because he did this awful prank where he says, the pool's going to open, come look at the sign. And they're so excited. And it was all fake. So she promises she's never going to talk to him again. So we're going to read day 12 tomorrow. And it'll be chapters 21 and 22 to figure out what happens next with Glory with only 5 days left till 4th of July, her birthday. So I'll see you next time.